The high-arched ceiling of the throne room usually hummed with the steady golden vibration of Aethelgardian power. Now it felt like a tomb. High King Valerius stood before the great star map, his fingers twitching near the hilt of his ceremonial blade. He watched, frozen, as the icons representing the border outposts of the shattered rim flickered from a proud, steady blue to a cold, bleeding red. One by one, the sensors went dark. No distress signals, no frantic pleas for reinforcements, just a sudden, absolute silence that swallowed the hegemony's finest warriors whole. It turned out that the spies Valerius had targeted in the Orion Nebula weren't spies at all. They were something far more dangerous. 6 hours. That was all it took for the pride of the Aethelgard fleet to become drifting scrap. The king turned to his master of ciphers, looking for an explanation, but the man was staring at a flickering grainy feed from the last surviving cruiser. On the screen, a single Terran ship's leak, small and terrifyingly fast, danced through a storm of heavy plasma fire, as if the bolts were moving in slow motion. It didn't fire back with the thunderous cannons the hegemony favored. Instead, it let out rhythmic pulses of blue light that skipped across the hulls of the massive warships, shorting out life support and propulsion in a single breath. The king's breath hitched. He had sent 5,000 elite soldiers to teach a lesson to a neutral hub he assumed was a Terran nest. In fact, he had just kicked a hornet's nest made of high-tensile steel. The feed cut to the interior of the hegemony's command ship. The screams weren't from the dying, but from the terrified. 50 figures in matte black armor had breached the hull. They moved with a fluidity that defied biology, clearing rooms with a precision that made the Aethelgardian god warriors look like stumbling toddlers. Every time a Terran raised a weapon, a soft thwip echoed, and another dozen armored Aethelgardians collapsed into unconscious heaps. They weren't even using lethal rounds. Ironically, the most decorated military in the sector was being dismantled with the casual efficiency of a gardener pulling weeds. Valerius felt the air in the room grow thin. He remembered the old legends about the Terran Republic, the whispers of a race that had evolved on a world of tectonic shifts, apex predators, and lethal atmospheres, survivors of a world that spent 200,000 years trying to kill them. He had dismissed it as Republic propaganda. He had seen their soldiers in the neutral ports young, laughing, seemingly soft. Princess Lyra stood beside her father, her eyes reflecting the crimson glow of the dying map. She saw what the king refused to acknowledge. The Terrans weren't fighting a war. They were conducting a retrieval. "Father," she whispered, her voice cracking the heavy silence of the chamber, "look at the energy signatures of the Terrans we're facing. They aren't their vanguard. They aren't even their regulars." She pointed to the intercepted comms scrolling across the sub-monitor. A voice came through, crisp and horrifyingly bored, speaking to a command center light years away. 8,000 targets, 6 hours I miss real combat, the voice muttered. There was a pause, followed by a sigh. "Command, be advised, the locals are still throwing spears at the bulkheads, requesting permission to wrap this up before nap time." Lyra's hand went to her throat. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The hegemony hadn't declared war on an army. They had attacked a school bus. The bridge of the Indomitable was a graveyard of ambition. High King Valerius watched the main viewer as the last of his immortal guards were systematically neutralized. They didn't fall to blades or plasma burns. They simply crumpled, their neural nets overloaded by precise, non-lethal acoustic pulses. The Terran Marines moved through the smoke like ghosts, silent, deficient, and entirely unimpressed. The heavy blast doors hissed open. A single Terran stepped onto the command deck. He wasn't wearing the hulking power armor of a frontline shock trooper. He wore a simple, charcoal gray flight suit with a small patch on the shoulder, a stylized torch, and a book. He looked tired. More than that, he looked annoyed. "I am High King Valerius of the Aethelgard hegemony," the king bellowed, though his voice lacked its usual thunder. "You have trespassed upon the sovereign heart of our empire. State your terms for our surrender." The Terran rubbed the bridge of his nose, ignoring the weapons still pointed at him by the trembling bridge crew. "Surrender? We don't want your stars, Valerius. We want our field trip back." He tapped a sequence on his wrist gauntlet, and the great star map shifted. It zoomed in on the neutral hub in the Orion Nebula, the site of the hegemony's initial strike. The grainy images sharpened, revealing not a fortress or a spy network, but a sprawling, open-air campus. There were no silos, only dormitories. No hangars, only gardens. "You hit a research station," the Terran said, his voice flat. "Those warriors your fleet tried to vaporize? They're 17-year-old xenobiology majors. We didn't fight your army. We fought your kindergarten. And frankly, the kids are more upset about their ruined soil samples than the fact that you tried to nuke them." A cold, hollow weight settled in the king's chest. He looked at Lyra, who had gone pale. The invading force currently dismantling the hegemony's military infrastructure wasn't a conquering legion. It was the security detail for a school outing. "In fact," the Terran continued, stepping closer until he was within arm's reach of the throne, "we've spent the last 6 hours trying to explain to their parents why a medieval LARP group in spacesuits started shooting at them. Do you have any idea how much paperwork this involves?" The absurdity of the situation stripped away the last of the king's pride. He had gambled his entire empire's reputation on a preemptive strike against children. The Terrans hadn't used their full strength because it wasn't a war to them. It was a disciplinary action. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, so far beyond the hegemony's reach that the concept of a threat from Eiffelgard was mathematically insignificant. "What happens now?" Lyra asked, her voice small. The Terran looked at her, his expression softening just a fraction. "Now, you pay for the broken glass and the traumatized lab equipment. You sign a non-aggression pact that actually sticks. And then we go home." He turned to leave, but stopped at the threshold of the blast doors. He looked back at Valerius, who looked smaller in his throne than he ever had before. "Next time you want to play at being a conqueror, check the syllabus first," the Terran said. "We're survivors of a world that spent 200,000 years trying to kill us. We're very good at staying alive, but we'd really prefer to just finish the semester." As the Terran ships blinked out of the system, leaving the hegemony's fleet drifting but alive, silence returned to the throne room. It wasn't the silence of power, but the quiet, bruised stillness of a lesson learned the hard way. The map on the wall began to turn blue again, but the light felt different now. It was no longer a symbol of conquest, but a reminder of how lucky they were to still be standing at all.